All right, I am excited to be sitting down today with John Mitchell. John is a functional medicine physician assistant turned concierge health consultant. After realizing that his training in medical school would only help patients manage symptoms rather than to truly heal, he stopped practicing conventional medicine after 4 years and began a decade-long journey of training with world-class functional medicine clinicians. He discovered how to leverage the body's innate capacity to heal from issues like fatigue, brain fog, gut issues, cholesterol, high blood sugar, and more, all without restrictive diets or too many supplements. He believes that despite the fast changes in our modern world, the principles to achieving peak health remain the same. Welcome, John.
That was great. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for hopping on. I know we were just talking right before. You're easily one of my favorite writers online, and I love your perspective on health and when that line between when traditional medicine fails and when you should try something different. So really excited to get into our conversation. And yeah, we'd love to just kind of go back to the beginning and sort of, I know you have this moment where you kind of realize, what's maybe wrong with the traditional path you chose, and how did it all start? Where did you get the inspiration to work in health, and where did it begin?
Yeah, I don't know why I even decided on medicine. I guess it was probably like my family kind of putting the bug in my ear, and I never really questioned it. And I would say it was probably when I started shadowing with doctors, I was like not totally sold on the path. And that was really the thing where I decided, okay, I'll do PA school instead of going for a full MD. It's like not as much schooling, it's not as much money, and then I can kind of decide if this is really what I want to do or not. And as I'm going through that, especially the PA program and going through my rotations, I was just like, we're not really helping people heal at all. We're pretty much I call it the name it, blame it, tame it game. We're putting a name uh, to a disease in the form of a diagnosis. We're blaming it for why you feel like shit, and then we're gonna tame it with a prescription. But you're not getting any better. You go on metformin for high blood sugar, or a blood pressure medication, and it's not fixing it. You're just lowering it. So my question was always like, well, how can we help people live good? How can we help people like live well? Like my driving force going into school was like, I want to live a hell yes life. And in order to do that, my body needs to be on point. And I wasn't seeing people doing that. And I thought, okay, I'll learn these skills in school. And I wasn't taught that. And I got lucky when I was shadowing with, I was actually shadowing with PA in the ICU, and he was into triathlon. So because he was so into it, he got me excited. So I getting into it, and I started getting into like nutrition, and so I was learning all this stuff on the side of like this is more in alignment with what I want to do with helping people. And what I had learned on my own was very different than we were learning in school, and there was that big disconnect. My we had 2 hours of nutrition education in my program, and it was taught by somebody who was obese. So it didn't land at all. It's like, this doesn't make any sense to me. So by the time I was graduating, I didn't even want to practice. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do because this isn't in alignment with how I want to operate. And that's when I discovered functional medicine, and that made sense to me. I was like, oh, it's really what medicine just should be. It's like, let's get to the root cause of chronic health issues. And if we can resolve it without having to put some medication, like, why wouldn't we do that?
Why do you think it's the system is set up the way it is? Why, because you point that out, like, why is nutrition only 2 hours when it's such a major part of health? It's the fuel that we put into our body. Why is there not so much of a focus on that holistic functional side in the traditional path?
Man, you can go all the way back to I forget when like the Flexner report was in like the 20s or something, where they essentially like they discredited pretty much everything that wasn't really pharmacologically driven. Um, and I think overall doctors mean well, like probably 90 plus percent. For the most part extremely smart. Many are much smarter than me. Um, but I think at this point, there is just so much machinery behind it that it just perpetuates that type of practice. So, like, and especially, man, this is what I didn't like about when I was, especially doing rotations, like going into different practices and learning under different doctors, is there's just so much, they're so entrenched in the way that they're taught. And if you go any bit against that, they're just very dismissive. Like, no, that can't work. No, that won't work. Like, we never taught this, or that's all like conspiracy or something. And that
Is there a fear there of the malpractice side of things too? Do you think that plays a big part of it, or is it mostly the like this is how it's done and that's the way we got to do it?
There might be some people like that, but I think one that they are overly cautious, and I think that is driven home in your schooling of like, yeah, make sure like you don't get sued, and I get that part of it. But if you document well enough and you're we call it informed consent. If you tell people everything, like, hey, these are the risks, these are the benefits, and then you let them decide what they want to do, you're fine. Like people who get sued, it's not because they mess up most of the time, it's because the people don't like you. Like there's plenty of data on that. So as long as like your patients like you, that's it's a very low risk, probably outside of like surgeries or something. In that case, yeah, you want to follow the book. Like I would not be like going on a tangent there, but beyond that, not so much. I think they're just so entrenched in like this way of thinking and they don't question it. Like what you are taught, like everything. If I have this case, if I have a high blood pressure situation, this is what we do, A, B, C. It's like rote memory, and that's essentially the way you practice. And that's what medical school selects for. If you think of the personality that goes into the school, it's I'm somebody who follows rules. I'm somebody who like reads a book or studies for hours on end every day. I do all these extracurriculars, and that's like the person who's your doctor. So like that's the type of person you're going to get most of the time, and they're not going to question things. Whereas what science is really is a process of questioning like everything. And in medicine, it's become the opposite, where like you're not allowed to question anything that's apparently established. Then you're so dogmatic, which it always seemed counterintuitive to me, and it's why I didn't like it. There was a lack of curiosity in too many people.
Yeah. What do you think that's what it was for you? Just having that innate curiosity that allowed you to question things, or do you think it was something else?
Yeah, yeah, I think I've kind of always been like I was like the black sheep of my family. Like I've always been someone where like I've been quite opinionated, but open at the same time. Like strong opinions loosely held. Yeah, and I think which is a good practice to have. Like I'll question things and I have a strong opinion, but if I come across something that's doing better and better to me is not like, hey, I saw this study. It's if you're getting better results objectively, then I'm open to it. And I'll learn from anybody. It doesn't matter if you're a naturopath, a doctor, like it doesn't matter. If I see that what you're doing is working, like why would I not be curious and be like, okay, how can I incorporate this into what I'm doing? Whereas you go to a standard doctor, it's like, well, that's not a part of our protocol, and that's it.
Yeah. Something that sticks out to me that I like about your stuff is, um, I think the amount of trust is so low these days in traditional medicine, like from the patient side too.
Yeah.
Um, and And so I think that can also be detrimental when it is the right choice to look into traditional stuff. So how do you kind of determine, it sounds like maybe it's results based, but how do you kind of determine when to explore alternative treatments versus go with the more traditional protocols?
Yeah. At a high level, it's severity of something. So you start getting into cancers or like a something that's deadly, then I'm going to be much more conventional. But if it's something where we have a lot of time and we're not going to do any harm, then why would you not try like the least invasive thing first? So yeah, I stratify it by the severity. But yeah, if somebody needs a surgery, I'm going to recommend the surgery as long as it's what's the best option. But again, a lot of times it's, you can avoid even a lot of surgeries if you go through certain steps. So yeah, it depends on severity.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did you happen to see that one guy? He went viral for dropping out as not dropping out, but he stopped practicing back surgeries. Um, Asian guy. He filmed himself out in the wild. His videos got like 30 million views or something like that.
I think I did. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder if that's a trend of doctors that are now moving more towards your side of things, or if that's like one off. Have you noticed anything from people that you may have known in school or in traditional environments that are now kind of like questioning things?
Yeah, I have. I've had people even from my program who've reached out to me and have been very curious with what I'm doing, which I was surprised by because it isn't the standard and it is that would that's I that was always a challenge for me when I first started of like, well, this is not going to be seen as like respectable or valid. And at a certain point, I was just like, all right, fuck. Like, I don't care. This, like, if I can help people, the more and more people I was able to help and prove that this works, I was like, that's all that matters. Like, why else would I do something else? So to see other people come to the same realization, because what they'll do is like they'll see all these patients and realize they're not getting anywhere, and then they go, well, what else can I do? If you're good, what a lot of doctors will do is they'll just refer out to a different specialist if they don't know. So you don't ever really end up learning anything. You just go, okay, like I can't treat this, but I'm going to pass it off to somebody else. And this is where a lot of patients get frustrated because they'll get passed off to doctor to doctor to doctor. They get through five or six of them and go like, I haven't gotten any better. What are we doing here? And that's usually where I meet a lot of people who have like gone through all that and they're frustrated and they're skeptical and they want a different way.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. So back to your story, you get out of school, you're not sure you want to, practice. What was that journey of like going from, well, shoot, what do I do now? And how do I find something that aligns with my values along the path of discovering functional medicine? And maybe it's good we kind of define functional medicine as well.
Yeah. So functional medicine, when it's practiced right, really is just root cause medicine. It's just figuring out why you have a certain disease state or symptoms and correcting it as opposed to managing the symptoms with medications or supplements. And I think this is where a lot of quote unquote functional or integrative people really aren't doing that is they just end up, we call it green allopathy. They just essentially are doing the same thing they were taught in medical school with a different toolbox. So instead of prescribing medications, they're now giving you a whole list of supplements, but it's still the same approach. So our my goal and what functional medicine really is what are the things that are causing chronic gut issues or an autoimmune issue? And it goes way beyond just simple supplementation, even nutrition. There's just a lot more to it. And that was the process for me of, okay, I asked that question, who are people that are getting better results and what are they doing differently? So I would just, and this was what in the like mid 2010. So listening to podcasts and Googling different doctors, and I would just like cold email them and ask to come and shadow or, join an internship or pay for a mentorship. Um, and just slowly kind of cobbling together what the best practices were. So not because the at the time and even still like probably the best program is the like Institute for Functional Medicine, but it's very broad. It's they'll give you a good cursory understanding of things, but it's not super practical. It's not like for this case you do this thing, which you only really learn through practicing or mentorship, through people walking you through, okay, yeah, everybody who has high blood pressure, it can be a multitude of things that are causing it. So there's no cookie cutter approach and that just takes time and experience. So the mentorship I found was probably the most useful thing outside of just practicing, seeing people.
Yeah. What were some of the things in that process that were kind of big aha moments or like counterintuitive things that you kind of discovered that you wouldn't have known otherwise?
Hmm. Yeah, there are several. One is nutrition. So I came in having a very strong belief of like this is what everybody should be eating, and man, that has varied over time. When I was starting off, it was like more plant-based, and then it switched to like a Weston A price diet, and then it switched to, is it like keto? So, and this is where practicing is really important because you learn very quickly what works with people and what doesn't, and you learn that there's no input that works for every person all the time. So that helped me open my eyes and go, okay, this has to be much more individualized. And then same thing with like supplements. I think early on you get excited. You're like, oh, I read that this like berberine helps with blood sugar, and you can take ashwagandha for stress, and all those things are well and good, and they can help. But also, so a lot of times they're not as effective as they're made out to sound. Like more the things that really move the needle are more of like the basic shit, like getting good quality restorative sleep, getting outside in the sun and walking. You know, like stress is a really big one as well. So things like that to me are really what a lot of people need. It's not a ton of supplements or a ton of testing, but that stuff's not sexy. So you're never gonna, that doesn't market well, which is a challenge for me always because like when you're in the middle and you're nuanced, it doesn't sell as well as, the Liver King. But that's really what works.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you trying to say that you can't just eat liver and then get a six pack and
L-
a
Liver,
bodybuilder physique?
liver is great, but apparently steroids helps too. Yeah.
Maybe even some implants.
Yeah, and he has good
Uh,
stuff. I mean, like a lot, he has many good tenets, and that's I try not to like really judge too many people because I think a lot of those people have good foundational things. It's just like people get caught up in a lot of like the fancy, sexy stuff when they also are good with like the basics a lot of times.
well, and from a business perspective, as you said, it doesn't sell as well. Not just like sell in the sense of gets attention, but what product are you going to sell for people to go outside and walk in the sun?
Right,
You know,
right. Yeah, exactly.
so there's not much of a business behind it. Um, so when people come to you, is there kind of like the most like a top three or five most common things they're dealing with, and how do you start with people? What do you begin?
Yeah, I usually have like two types of people who come to me. One is the person who does have a chronic health issue, and like the top ones would certainly be energy, gut issues, um, hormones, so testosterone, things like that, and then like autoimmune conditions. And then there's like the other half where they generally feel pretty good, but they want to optimize. They're like, all right, I want to make sure that like I'm living well, that I'm gonna live long. So they're more about like the longevity and health quality. Um, so with all of them, I mean, the first step is just to want to understand like what their goals are, what their challenges are, and that they get a good understanding of where they're starting at, which takes time. Like my initial, I call it a case review, is like 90 minutes, and like even then, we're really just scratching the surface of what's going on. It takes for a lot, especially a complicated case, it takes time. And I think this is what people don't understand is they think like you should be able to figure it out real fast. It can be quite complex depending on a multitude of factors. So my goal is just to understand them, and then from there, okay, what appropriate labs do we need to really get a good detailed look under the hood. So we want to get more objective data. I like information as long as it's like useful, and based on that allows us to determine what we need to do with them. And the other thing that I found is very useful is to have a good system to work through. I used to practice, the first practice I was in, we would just throw like the kitchen sink at a problem. And people really weren't getting, like, I was actually really disheartened with functional medicine the first practice I was in. I was like some people are getting better, but a lot of them are relapsing. And I was just like, why is this happening? So I hired a mentor while I was working in this other practice. That was a bone of contention because I was just like, man, that's all I cared about. I just want people to get better, and that's what they're able to show me is like you got to take people through a process and work. I always say like work upstream and work your way downstream because if you have like low testosterone, for instance, it's not just about throwing a bunch of like like Fedosia and Tongat Ali and whatnot. It's again, why is it low? Let's identify those things and let's start correcting those in the proper sequence. And then you get way better results. People are much more likely to stick to the plan because they understand what you're doing. Um, and if something isn't going right, then you can go backwards. You can go through those steps and troubleshoot. But if you just throw everything at somebody all at once, then you're like, where do we go from here? And that happened a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. More methodical.
Yeah, you would need that, and that just takes that either takes time, like you spend a ton of time, or you work with somebody and they help kind of speed up that learning curve.
Yeah. So how do you besides feedback from people, how do you measure good health? Is it the inverse of those things, like just feeling great, good energy, digesting well, all those types of signs?
Yeah, yeah. How you feel subjectively is really important, and then also labs. If you do feel good, then okay, let's just make sure that we're not missing anything, and that's where like the quote unquote healthier people will come to me to make sure. Because yeah, a lot of things you don't feel right away. Like you don't feel high blood pressure, you don't feel if your cholesterol's really off. Um, and I mean, if you're just kind of like if you're pre-diabetic, you're not really going to notice it either. But it's you want to make sure those are not a problem also. So both are useful. It's the same thing like if you're a business owner and you don't understand what your P&L is, you don't look at your books, you have no idea the health of your company.
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. So, um, I know it gets really personalized, and it's like really dependent on a lot of factors, people's symptoms, what they're reporting, and that'll change how you approach something. But are there sort of like some of your favorite general health things that kind of surprise people, that they say, oh, I didn't expect that X would be helpful, or that Y would do this? And is there things that help can help almost anybody that you kind of notice like aren't common knowledge?
Hmm. I mean, a lot of the foundational stuff I wouldn't say is like unknown, but those are the ones I think that are overlooked because they aren't sexy and they're relatively easy to do. Like getting outside in the sun when you wake up and getting outside in the middle of the day and going for a walk with your shirt off. Wearing blue blockers before you go to bed and having good sleep routine. Like those things do move the needle a lot. And it's just, because you don't subjectively maybe notice it right away is where people are is where people don't realize how important it is. So what I hear a lot from a lot of people, for a lot of my clients when they're successful is I feel better, but I don't know why, which is our goal because you take testosterone and you're going to feel it right away. But if you improve you start working on your sleep, you're getting outside in the sun, you're eating better. A lot of those things you don't notice right away. It's a slow improvement, but that's usually the things that are going to move the needle the most.
Yeah.
It's also why people don't have a hard time sticking to it because it's a consistency thing, and you have to be like, okay, if I do this for 2 months, like I'm going to feel better, even though I don't feel better within a week.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, because we're kind of in that, we want that fast feedback loop, right? We want it like, oh, I
Yeah.
did this and I got this.
I've had to change the way I do things for that purpose to get buy-in. So I'll have like, hey, in a month, what would you like to hit? Let's pick something small just to get like a quick win so they're bought in. Because yeah, sometimes if you don't see results relatively quickly, then you do start to question things naturally. I think that's fair. So that's like more of the art to it of like, okay, how are we going to get people to buy into the next month and next month? And that's been a skill set I've had to develop.
I know before our call we were talking about kids a little bit. I know you're a dad. Is there how do you approach things with your own family in terms of like, you know, instilling good habits, or being an example? What are sort of some of the things you like to do with the family?
Yeah, as we were talking, I was telling you, right? It changes as you have more kids. You start to become more and more lax. Yeah, you got to pick your battles. Kids are tough there, so I again, it's similar stuff like trying to be good with the foundations. Like bedtime routine is like super important. So making sure they're getting plenty of sleep, like we're huge on that. Making sure they're getting outside and playing. We control the nutrition as pretty much as best we can. So trying to get whole foods whenever possible. We don't If we're doing dinner, they're gonna eat what we're eating. We're not creating a different meal. They're not doing French fries and chicken fingers. And then we'll be flexible with other
No,
stuff.
no, no dino nuggets.
Right. If we go out though, we'll try our best. We'll be like, hey, let's have like an adult meal and not just go again for chicken fingers or fries. But at the same time, if we're out and like they want like dessert or something, like we're not going to stop them from that. So we try and control what we can. The other challenge is like, especially if you're really close with like family, that's always hard because you go to your parents or your spouse's parents, and then they're going to have their own input and way of doing things, and there is like a bit of compromise that goes there, and that's a constant discussion with me and my wife of like, all right, like we're not bringing home all this junk that they're trying to give us because then the kids are going to want it, and that becomes a battle.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
big
Sorry, go ahead.
no, yeah, it's a constant like, all right, where are we going to draw the line?
Yeah, because our little guy is only 2 months old, but I'm already anticipating those things. Like unless you're gonna live like a hermit,
Yeah,
out in nature, you're gonna come into contact with the rest of the world and different foods and different habits and
man, and everybody's got a different opinion, and I don't know what's right there because like my brother's more strict with his kids, and you can see there are times where they'll like gravitate like she was eating like junk off the floor because she wasn't getting it at home. So is that the best way? I don't know. So yeah, and I think with each kid it's different too. It's the same thing with how I work with people. It's the same with my kids. Like each one of them is going to have a different personality, and you have to change up your approach for each one. So yeah, as long as you're willing to do that, I think you'll be much more successful. But if you're like, dude, it's gotta be this way, you're gonna learn really quickly that's it's not gonna work very well.
yeah. Well, like you said, choose your battles, and not every day is gonna be perfect. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I like your approach of eating. They eat what you eat. I noticed, my wife is from Brazil, and they're like really family friendly over there. Like all the restaurants have, places for kids to play, and they're really inclusive in that way. But also like the menu is very it doesn't change much. Like you'll find like filet
Mm,
mignon beef on on the menu for the kids, and I think it really comes that kind of stuff comes through with the Brazilian people because they all are like really vibrant and look really healthy and um yeah, when my wife like saw the way kids ate in the United States, she was kind of shocked.
is wild. It's wild. Yeah, I don't understand. I mean, it drives me crazy. Like, yeah, how parents will just feed their kids junk, and I think it's because it's just the default here. That's what they see, and they're like, oh, this is what kids eat. And like
Yeah,
in reality, like no, like they're gonna eat what you allow them to, for the most part. Like some are more picky than others, but I think a lot of that is how you're raising your kids. And if you teach them like, hey, this is like what we're eating, this is what a good meal looks like, and every so often we'll do something that's less healthy, like they're usually gonna play a game. Like my kids are not that they're pretty good about it, but yeah, it is challenging if you are surrounded by people who are making unhealthy decisions, and then you have to have like those conversations with your kids. And if they're really young, then they're not quite gonna get it.
yeah,
Yeah, and that, or if like your family members don't get it, and then they start kind of like judging you. Like it goes both ways. Like we can judge our families for like how they eat, but they'll do the same. Like you're way too strict with your kids, and yeah, you gotta. It's very nuanced.
yeah. Just shifting gears for a second. I know we kind of covered that a lot of the basic unsexy things are, move the needle a lot. What, if any, of the more advanced like biohacking things do you like and I think you think are worthwhile looking into?
I think sauna's great. Yeah, I'm a big fan of saunas. And
Dry
there's
sauna, right?
it could be dry. Yeah, dry if you do infrared. They'll have a little bit different benefits. But from like if you look at the studies, then yeah, you got to get it up a certain temperature to really start to see like more of like the cognitive longevity benefits. Infrared, if you're using like a near one where you do get some good heat, that can help, and then like helps with detoxification, and it's pretty applicable to most people. Whereas like the opposite end of the spectrum would be like your cold plunges, where I don't think the data is really as strong for the benefits, especially long term. And personally, what I see with a lot of people, especially because I have people who come in pretty broken down, is that it's a strong sympathetic stimulant. Like it will, um, it's a stressor to the body. And if you're already somebody who's has chronic fatigue, or you have like a burnout situation, we call it HPA axis dysfunction, it's not what you should be doing. It's too much of a hormetic stress. So you really want to do more of like the resting and recovery. So sauna tends to be more gentle. So I love that. Um, that'd be probably my number one biohack that I like. Um, Peptides can be quite useful, again, depending on the use. But again, I think they're a little overhyped for most things. I'm trying to think of what else that I do biohacking wise, but those would be like probably the main one.
Speaking about peptides, what are your thoughts on the GLP-1 trend?
I'm not totally against them. It's the same with it. I look at it the same as any medication, where if we can lose weight without it, then that would be my first go around. If you're somebody who is morbidly obese, you're like 400 pounds, you've tried a bunch of things, like you've actively, like really genuinely tried. Um, it can be quite useful. And also, even if it's just like to start building momentum, I think it'd be a quite useful tool as you're working on the other things, like making sure you're getting enough protein, that you're doing weight training so you're not losing a bunch of muscle or bone mass. Then it can be great. I think where people get in trouble is, again, they're just like they want a quick fix. They want to go on it, lose weight, and not do anything else. And I think we're waiting for the other shoe to drop. I think we're going to see ramifications of that longer term, and that will be a problem. And then the other thing with, again, with any medication, I learned this from my one of my pharmacology professors. She said you never really want to try a drug unless it's been on the market for 10 years, because you just don't know. You just don't know the long-term consequences. No matter how many studies have been done, you can't trust them to want to be honest, because they don't have to be. The FDA just reviews the data they're given by these companies. It's not like they're seeing everything, so they don't know. And there are unknowns. There are just things that you just can't know until you've been on something for an extended period of time. So I'm very cautious with anything relatively new. So if I were like, for me, if I were to do it with somebody, it would always be like a low dose while working on all the other things to help as well. And I've had people come to me where they've been on like a Ozempic or Wegovy, and they stalled out. And then we were able to, one, to kind of slowly drop them off it, but also drop their weight while, being on that or not being on it at all. So you can do both. So yeah, it's cautiously, it's good for some people, but I think we're overdoing it for a lot of people, which makes sense because it is very effective at suppressing your appetite, and you're going to lose weight when you're not eating much.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine you come across that sort of balance between, the people that want to do the work versus the people that just want the easy fix.
Yeah, and I fortunately, and I guess it's a part of like marketing, but I get the type of people who are looking to do the work, which is good. But if I were in a just a standard medical practice, then yes, that you're not going to come across that many people. And I think that is the challenge that a lot of doctors come up against, and why probably they do go to those things so much reflexively, because they're just so used to people not wanting to do much else, and they also don't have much time. You got like 10 minutes per patient. What are you going to do in that much time to help them make meaningful change besides write a prescription? And when something is as effective as that, it makes sense why they gravitate towards it.
Yeah. Are there other peptides that you like, specific ones and for specific use cases?
Yeah, I like the BPC 157 and the TB 500 when we talk about recovery. And then and that's the BPC 157 for gut stuff I've seen quite to be quite effective orally. So that's always good. Like the sermorelin and the different offshoots can also be quite useful. Um, I haven't played around with a ton outside of that. Like I'll use them here or there, but again, I rarely need to use them, and two, a lot of them you need to inject for them to be effective, and that's a hurdle for a lot of people anyways.
The fear of needles.
Yeah, the fear of needles, they don't want to be injecting themselves all the time. Again, I think it's probably how more I market because there are plenty of people who that's what they want. But yeah, the type of people I work with generally are trying to get off of a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, Anything else you want to cover that you want to talk about that you think is important that we didn't cover?
You know what's really interesting is like the just the with AI coming on board now. I found it really I've been thinking so much about it because I like that it gives people so much information, but it's also it misses a lot. So I would say like it's very especially if it's a more known thing. If we're talking about blood pressure or something where you're trying to figure out like labs to assess your risk for heart disease, it's quite good. But when comes to like more nuanced things, things that are more complex, then I think it tends to miss a lot, and people are getting misled with it. So I think it's a great tool. But yeah, we definitely I would say, and it'll probably get better over time. But yeah, it's still a far ways off. It's not something I would take as like de facto truth. And I see a lot of people doing that, like, oh, GPT said I should be, eating this food and doing this. And I've seen the write outs, and I'm like, well, there's like five things here that it's not right. Like I'll give an example. I saw someone post about their nutrition, and it said like, oh, this is giving me all the nutrients I need for the day, and like the vitamin A content was from beta carotene. I'm like, well, that's poorly converted. It's the precursor to retinol active form. So I'm like, that's poorly converted in most people. So like you're not really getting all the vitamin A you need. And that type of example happens across the board with a lot of the recommendations. And that's where you have to be careful. And unless you know what you're looking at to look at that, I don't know how you would tell. I don't know how you could look at it and understand like what to follow and what not. So like on net, it's a net positive, but you definitely have to be careful with this because it's nuance.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, it's like, you almost have to have a broader knowledge or context to be able to evaluate the claims. And yeah, it's happened to me where I'll ask AI something and I know for a fact it's wrong. And it got me thinking like, are our kids gonna know or their kids gonna know to question AI? You
Right,
know,
right.
it's gonna
Yeah.
become so second nature.
Yeah, I don't know where it's going to head. I imagine it will just continue to get better. Um, yeah, and again, I think probably because it's pulling from public sources. So you're a lot of the interesting things that like I learned from other practitioners are things that like they learned along the way that are like kind of little like tricks, and like they're not publicly sharing all that stuff. Like they're not sharing all like the what makes them unique. So you're not going to find that in that type of source. You'll find like a lot of the more generic things, which is a good start. It's a good starting point. It's not, but if you're using that and you're still not getting to where you need to go, then yeah, you have to dig deeper.
Yeah. Do you like using it as a practitioner?
I love it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great. Like if you know how to prompt it right, like it has helped my workload a lot. Like if I want to put together meal plans for somebody, it's way faster than if like I was going to do that for each person. That's a pain. So that I love that. For certain labs, if I see something and I'm like, I want to kind of like remind myself because you can have an abnormal lab and it can mean one of like 10 things sometimes. And to get a quick feedback of like, oh, right, that's right. I want to look into these as well. I find that really useful. Um, there haven't been too many cases where it's been a very complex case where I'm like, all right, let's throw this in and see what it pops out. Like, I don't think that's been super useful. But yeah, just like quick spot checking things, or yeah, me trying to just remember, all right, this is what this like when this case happens, these are all the things you want to consider. It's good. It's a good thing to use. So I don't know why you wouldn't. Like humans are fallible and there's only so much we can remember. So just as something to like double check something, I think it's a great tool because I've seen some people be like, "Oh, your doctor's using GPT now. Like you can do that yourself." And like I said, to
Yeah.
an extent you can, but
Yeah.
at least like you know what you're looking for. Like you're like, "Oh, right, okay, this is what I was looking for, and how to prompt it properly to get the right response." Um, the prompting is so important because if I don't say it right, it'll just give me, especially with a contentious topic, you start bringing up like vaccines or something, you're only going to get a one-way answer, and then you know,
And
that
that's
I've
and that's tough
noticed.
because some of those contentious topics are could play a major make a major difference in someone's health, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's contentious for a reason a lot of times where it's like, hey, this isn't always super straightforward, but you can see that the app has been trained to think a specific way. No matter how many times I try and prompt it and get around it, and I'm like, okay, this is not helping.
It's a brick wall.
Yeah, that's frustrating. I'm hoping that gets better, and it might just be what the apps I'm using. But yeah, that I would like to see improved.
Yeah. Well, like you said in the very beginning, with medical school, kind of choosing for people like with good rote memorization, you know, I don't think that's ultimately where the value is most, right? Like people are not paying you and coming to you because you can memorize a bunch of stuff. They come to you because you can kind of, synthesize a bunch of different information and be able to give them feedback that's, you know, something that has that sort of human touch, that human intuition and creativity, right?
Yeah, and a lot of it is this is what I was probably surprised by is a lot of it is more implementation and like troubleshooting what's getting in the way psychologically. Like, why are you not doing the things that are the action items that we discussed? And that's where a lot of the work is what's getting in the way of you just implementing. And yeah, that's more human. That's harder to do. You're not gonna be able to just put that into a prompt and get an answer there.
Yeah. So I imagine that might be sort of a surprising element that you've sort of had to kind of think about the psychological side of things beyond just the coaching. And I mean, well, I guess coaching is the psychological part, but like you said, you can't just give somebody something and expect like a perfect 100%, dedication to it. And you have to get over those hurdles mentally.
That's yeah, it's the art of medicine they call it, right? So, and I've had to change up the way that I practice since when I started. Like the first practice I was in, they would do these like packages where you'd come and you get like 5 visits in 6 months or something or a year. And there was so much time in between each visit that I found a lot of things fell through the cracks, and that's one reason why people weren't doing well. So a lot of the way I structure things is we have a lot more frequency of visits and accountability, just to make sure we're moving the needle. And so I'm not giving people 10 action items to do all at once. It's all right, let's do one or two things this week and nail it and then build on it. Because that's really what we're doing is we're building habits and routines that you need to sustain long term. If you have an autoimmune issue and you make all these great changes, but then you revert back after 6 months, like, yeah, you're going to start feeling shitty again. So, how can we make sure this is a sustainable change? And that is going to take time for most people to build those habits and routines. And if you're not structured that way, I don't see how you could be successful. And that's always where when I see these like bigger organizations, that's the problem is there's just not enough follow-up. Or if you do have a lot of follow-up, then it's with a lot of people who are just not as well trained. You just like how are you going to get all that staff? Um, and then there's not a lot of continuity. Like you're working with different people and they're not on the same page, and that's also going to hurt you.
Yeah. So for habit changing, is it that sort of taking things slowly and one at a time, the biggest difference you've seen in getting people to kind of stick to it? Or is there anything else that has helped you with changing habits?
That's huge. Yeah. And it's psychology too. So what is it? What's getting in the way? Like why are you drinking after work every day? Um, yeah, why are we so stressed out all the time and kind of really unpacking it. So I'm just asking a ton of questions and really starting to get into the psychology. And I recently just started getting into like training for NLP, neuro linguistic programming, and just so I can have more of those tools of helping people deal with like the subconscious. Because what I'm really starting to appreciate is 90+% of how we operate throughout the day is on a subconscious level. Like you don't think when you drive 30 minutes, you're not like thinking all the time about where you're going. You're pretty much like on autopilot and you're doing other things. And our whole life is like that. So what is it? What's going on at subconscious level that's driving you to make these changes? All right, let's start to like learn how to speak to that subconscious, reframe it so that like it's not going to trip you up. And that's a challenge. I mean, especially now with I think almost everyone has like a dopamine addiction to some extent, like just being on social. It's like dopamine from anything. Like it could be substances, it could be food, it can be social media, it could be porn, it could be trading. Like there's just so many things that can distract you that I think people are jumping from thing to thing. So how can we be more mindful throughout the day becomes more and more of a challenge, and I imagine it only becomes more of a challenge in the future. And that's where a lot of people, myself included, like need most of the work. And that's the goal is like, all right, how can we build more space and time and awareness?
Yeah. Yeah. I totally noticed that myself. Like I'm going through one of those phases right now where I can just feel myself just addicted, to my phone and technology, and
Yeah.
I need a good reset, but yeah, it's interesting. Like s something came to mind, which is it's within the context of psychology. People say this, like, most people don't want to change, and even the ones who do, it takes them a long time to change.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes, yeah, believe me, it takes a while. Um, because I've been diagnosed with ADD and I think I fit a lot of the traits for it. And then what I've realized is I have to be super mindful of my inputs because like if I start off my day with a lot of things that are like I'm listening to a podcast and I watch a YouTube video or listen to music, like that jumping from thing to thing is creating like little dopamine spikes where I'm constantly searching for more of it throughout the day. So I have to be like super mindful of really limiting those inputs so I can like just be present and focus on the task. And that affects you psychologically. I think that is like a low level stressor throughout the day that people don't realize.
Oh yeah, interesting. Like you might think it's a relaxing thing, but it's actually kind of stressing you
Yeah.
physiologically.
Yeah, everything has like a yin and yang. So like, yeah, I drink alcohol at night because it helps me calm down, but then I'm a little bit more anxious the next day. I don't sleep as well. And so you have to be super mindful. So my question would be, why are we going to it? What's it helping with? Why you feel like you have to drink that? Why are you so stressed out? Let's kind of backtrack and see if we can find other things that are gonna, one, either have you less stress at the end of the day or something that's more productive that can help you de-stress without having to go to that.
On that line, I know you mentioned obviously going on walks and being out in the sun, but does being out in like nature really come into play for yourself, for your clients? Do you suggest that for addressing those types of
Yeah, I think so. I think
loops?
I personally find it's extremely effective, especially if you're not on like listening, like on a device or something and you're really present. Yeah, I think it's huge. Um, Getting your bare feet on the ground, like earthing is, I think it is like a quite a useful practice as well. But yeah, the more time you can get out and unplug, I don't see how it doesn't calm you down.
John, awesome. I really enjoyed this conversation. How can people find you and work with you?
Yeah, so website is johnmitchellpa.com. It's John without an H. And then most of my handles on social, same thing, John Mitchell PA.
Cool. Thanks, John. Really appreciate the time, and looking forward to reconnecting again soon.
Right on, Mike. Thanks so much.
All right. Bye.